Okay, so we're going to walk through this last assignment in week one, which is who's in the house. Okay, so remember we're working sequentially through the course, so you need to have completed this one before you do the who's in the house. So let's look at the requirements. Now, this one, and I need to go back because this is important. This one, and you can tell by these icons here, the difference between an assignment that you submit to me for grading and a discussion board. And in the weekly work, and I've discussed this, so it's a little bit of a repeat, you'll have a combination of sometimes assignments and sometimes discussion. And we'll work more on that in week two, but for this week, know that the work that you do here is shared with everyone in the class. I'm going to go ahead and click into that item. So because it's shared with everyone in the class, and hopefully you're starting to get this pattern, is that we're going to use the public repo that is in our course organization. Okay, so let's just go ahead. And I gave you the example, so for you, you know what that would be. And then we're going to name the folder. So we're going to create a folder first, and then I'm going to walk you through how to create the standard files that you'll need for this class. So I'm going to scoot over, meaning move over to VS Code. And in VS Code, I have it kind of where we left off last time. I have rolled, and I've rolled them up. So if you click here, it rolls them down. You click here, it rolls them up. Now, one thing you can do is instead of opening this base folder, you could just open these directly. You kind of, you get to choose how you want to do this. Because I move back and forth, I typically am somebody that will have them open, but let's just show you the difference. So now I can have just this folder open, and then I'm not looking at the other one. So there may be times based on the way you work and how you like things done that you'll do it either way. But again here, okay, so now in here you will see if you roll your mouse over, right, the folder, in this case the repo that we have open, you have a couple options here, and this is in the Explorer part of the VS Code window. So you have a new file, a new folder, refresh what's happening in here, or we can just close, I believe that's close whatever you have open. But we'll look at that again in a minute. So what I'm going to have you do is first create a new folder. And what's important here is if when I click new folder, it's going to immediately place that folder underneath whatever the root folder I have open. Okay, so that's why it's important to understand where you are at as far as what you have open. And because you want this folder, I want you to place this folder in the public. So I'm going to do W1. Okay. So W1 for week one kind of makes sense, just a short abbreviation. And now inside of this W1, we're going to create a new file. So again, now see if I was here, right, I could create a file here, but it would create it at this level. So what we want to do here is create a new file, but we want to create it in this W1 folder. So we want to make sure that is activated by having it selected here. So I'm going to do this. Again, it gives me kind of, okay, what's the name of the file? And now I'm going to go index.html. This is a standard file that you use whenever you're setting up a new website, new project, right? So you're going to create this, and I'll show you different ways so you can just copy some over or whatever. But once I hit enter here, it actually creates the file, okay? Now, this file is green. We have not seen this in this course yet. What we saw before was yellow. And yellow was because we were modifying a file that already had been existed in what's called the repo that is being version controlled. But in this case, we're creating a new file. Now, if I didn't have the autosave on, it would need to save that. I would need to go in and save that once I add content to it, or even just right here. But because I have that on, it automatically saves it, but it doesn't version control it. All right, so for an index file, I'm going to do something very quick. I'm going to hit the exclamation point, and then I'm going to hit tab. Now, when I do that, and I'll just undo it for a minute so you can see this, and actually even here it's going to show it's using this built-in shortcut called emit that is actually just a shortcut way of writing HTML. And if I, again, hit exclamation point and notice how there's an abbreviation there, and oh, there's also one for triple. I wonder what that one is. So here, if I hit tab, then that creates that standard file. So hopefully you have a little experience with HTML, but if you don't, we'll get you through it. But this is the basic setup for any web page, and these are tags, so the doc type, the HTML. Notice how these are nested, right? In the head section, right? And then we have the body section. Okay, so this is just a standard file. And again, at this point, we've created some content, but we haven't version controlled it. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through because I think it's good experience to have the version control now just creating this file. So I'm going to go to Terminal, New Terminal. Now, because I have this folder open, I don't have to do that little trick I showed you before where I had you open it in Integrated Terminal. This is kind of nicer in the sense that it's going to default into this folder, okay, and in this case into the repo. So I can do get status here, and it's going to show me, hey, you have an untracked file, okay? So untracked means I've never added this file into my repo before. So now to add it, it's going to be not the similar, let's go back and look. Actually, you can go back and look at the assignment beforehand where I showed you how to do the get add. But let me just clear it so you can see it. So again, the reason this is green here, showing on this get status is red, is we've created a file we have not tracked yet. Okay, so this is the U for untracked. Okay. So I'm going to do get add, and at this point I could just do star, and then anything that I had in that I had modified would have been, in this case, added to, or we call it staged as well. We stage it, but now we're going to actually commit it. Now notice also here, there is A here, okay? So we could also do get status if we wanted to, again, just to now understand so that we have changes to be committed, right? So it now has the file listed here as green, which means, I know it can be a little confusing, but just these color codes are kind of nice once you start getting used to them. But it is a little different when you're looking at it on the command line. But now we're going to do, I'm going to clear that again, I'm going to do get commit -m, I'm going to say adding index.html file. Okay? Now it's really important when you're doing this to type it exactly this way, and you may have run into this already when doing the previous assignment. So you'll see that why you want to do it with the spaces, with the dash, no spaces, with the quotes. If you miss a quote, it'll look crazy, but you can get out of it. It's not a big deal. So I'm going to hit enter. So now what's happened is I've added that file. I've created the folder, I've added the file, I've then done the version control, the get workflow on the file. Okay. Now at this point I haven't pushed anything to GitHub because I'm going to do some additional work. Okay, so let's do some additional work. Now what I want to do, and this kind of leads into what I talked about in week, the very beginning about the attendance, about chat GDP, and how the importance are the amount of work and information we can do with that. So what we're going to do is create our first JavaScript file. Okay, now I'm going to show you in next week different ways we can write JavaScript, but for today I'm just going to actually have you create another file, and then I'll show you how to write some HTML then to link the two files together. But to start, I went over to chat. I said, when learning JavaScript, what's a standard file name to give your first JavaScript file? And what's kind of interesting, right, is that there's no specific standard. I've seen app.js, main, I've seen script, I've seen main, I've seen index. You can do project name, right? It's important to note that the choice of the file name is largely a matter of personal preference, but the key is to be consistent. So what I would suggest at this point is we use main.js. I think this represents because, anyway, I just think that's so let's just agree, right? So now we're going to create another file. We're going to call this one main.js. Okay. Now in this file, right, we haven't, again, we will version control that in a minute. We don't have anything in here. We'll write some code. I don't know if we'll write it this time, but we'll write some code in here. Well, we'll see. Okay, so I'm going to go back to here. Now that I have that file, I'm going to go back to here. And up in here, I'm going to type script. Now when I type script this way, what it's going to do is it's actually, notice what it did, is it actually, as soon as I started typing, it did this is IntelliSense. So it's trying to say, hey, I think you're going to write the script file, and look at this. We can even do, which we need to do next, the source attribute as well. So if we do it that way, then it keeps us from having to write source, which is cool. So the source of the script file is main.js. And because it's in the same folder level of the index file, all we have to do here, right, is just type main.js. Okay, and again, notice as soon as I start typing, right, the system is trying to help me be more efficient and not making errors by giving me hints, right, which is awesome. Okay, so down here I'm just going to do a H1, which is a heading. I'm going to do tab. I'm going to type Rio's first page, right? Cool. So now we have an index page. We have a main.js page. We don't have anything in here yet. We have not only let VS Code create a lot of this for us. Okay. By the way, if you're taking one of my other courses, we talk a lot more about this here. But for now, we're going to kind of just wave our hand and talk about it as needed. Right? You could update the title. There's just so much more you could do here, but that's not really what we're doing here. What we're really doing here is learning how to create the standard files, and now importantly, how to actually view them. Okay. So this leads into a short discussion about extensions. So when you're in VS Code, by the way, that version control is something that allows you to do some of this command stuff in the editor. But I recommend when you're first starting out is you actually do this stuff in the command line, because it's just powerful to get used to command line and doing it that way. And then there's an icon for running stuff, but the one I want you to go to is extensions. So for my particular install, I have a couple of things that I recommend just kind of off the beginning, which is basically live server. Now, you're probably not going to have this. So what you would do, right, when you're here is you could type live server, right? And then what you will find is the extension, and then when you click on it, I already have it enabled. So I don't get the option, you should, to enable it. Now, we'll talk about in a minute what it's going to give you. So that's the first one I recommend, okay, is having that one. Go ahead and have it, I believe, is that right? Go live? Maybe that's actually go live server. Maybe there's a different one. Just going to make sure, because there's multiple of these. Just want to make sure that's the right one. Yeah, it's in there. Must be the right one. Okay. So live server, let's hope that's the right one, because like I said, there's multiples that you can choose from. So enable that one. And the other one that I have, now again, I'm going to go back here. I'm going to get rid of that. Sorry, bring this back. Very cool. Okay. So I'm going to back out of this. So this shows me. So now when you do that, you should then have in a new extension that is installed. Now you can see I have a couple other things here. The other one I think is really good is Prettier. We'll talk about the benefit of that as we move into the course. You don't have to do that one today, but if you wanted to, you absolutely could search for Prettier and have that one. It just makes some of your code look nicer. Okay. All right. So back here. What does this give us? So it should give you an icon down here as soon as you have it installed. And let me just go ahead and click off of this so we no longer have that. Okay, because you could just run this in the file manager. And what do I mean by that? Is we could, and I'm on my Mac today, but you have a similar option when you're in Windows as reveal in file manager. So in this case, reveal in Finder. So this is the actual files and folders in the native operating system. And I could just double click on here and that would show me the web page, which is cool. But over time, what you're going to want to do, let me bring back VS Code here, is you're actually going to want to run this as a web page. Okay, so what you want to do here is while you have the index page up, okay, is just go ahead and hit go live. So what go live will do, and you can see, I should have pointed this out the other way we opened it, is it just opened the file. But this actually created a little server locally, which is nice. This is all local. Now, the reason I'm pointing this out is that sometimes students get a little confused when I say submit your URLs, and they think this is the URL to submit. And it's not. This URL is only available to you running locally the server that you have, that we have now started because we have this live server. And it shows it's from the extension. You can say don't show it again if you want. So I just leave it there. And the other thing you can do is if you want to stop live server, you can actually just click there to close the server. Okay, so now why do live server? Well, for one thing, right, I can do H2, and I can say using JavaScript, right? And when I come back over here, and matter of fact, one of the things you can, what makes it really nice just from a workflow is I'm going to pull that tab out. I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to take my VS Code. And then what I can do is just like as I write code, I can have it show up on the other side of the page. And this is what we call live or hot reloading, right? So, and then you could go, this is live. Now, so what will happen is it'll automatically update, which is nice. Really, really nice. Okay. So the other thing that I wanted you to do for this assignment, so at this point, let's go ahead and do the Git workflow, okay? Because we have a page, we haven't written any JavaScript yet. We're about to get a short introduction to Chrome DevTools because it's something that is really important for you to use, understand in this course. And so even though we haven't written anything in here, matter of fact, let's just come over here and let's do console.log. Hello world, very common. That was again my IntelliSense. Actually, it could have been the Copilot. I should deactivate it. Copilot was like, "Oh, are you doing a hello world?" So notice that I've done a JavaScript command that you'll see very commonly. It's got a string. That's what these quotes are. It's got brackets around it. Yeah, it's just the very most common file you use. I just wanted to put something in there. Again, we'll talk about it next week. All right, so what we want to do now is we have now updated the index file. It is yellow because we had already version controlled it, but we've modified it and we've added a new file. Okay, so for Git, what we want to do is do git add star git commit -m, and I would say adding main.js. Okay, so there we go. So now we have added that, we've committed that, but again at this point we haven't pushed anything, and that's okay. What you can do is work along, and then when you're ready to submit your work, then you could push it, but you could push it along the way. It's really up to you. And what I mean by that push, and let me just go over and show you why we're here, right? 93, right? So we're working in public. Well, because we haven't pushed yet, none of the files out on GitHub for this public repo have been updated yet. Okay, so let's just go ahead and do that. Let's do git push. Boom, 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 right? And what you want to look for here is that you didn't get any error message and it looked like everything was successful. And if I come over here and hit refresh, cool. I have that week 1 now with those 2 files that I placed in there. Okay, so at least from what you need to submit now, but I just want to, before we get ready to submit, I just want to give you just a minute here to talk about the Chrome DevTools. So if I right click and hit inspect, and this is true with if I click on, and these are just content that I've, the HTML has rendered into the page, right click inspect, this drops me into this Chrome DevTools. Now DevTools is available in Firefox and Brave and any other browser. They're not called DevTools, but that's the same thing. And so what you want to do is come over here to console, and if you got this, If you got everything set up, you should see Hello World in here. And if you have, what that tells you is that everything in here, as far as your script tag, as far as your JS file, is working and connected and outputting correctly. Okay? And I just want you to know how to do that, because as we move further in the course, you're going to use this a lot to understand this code. I mean, we could write code right here, and we actually may as we move through the course. Okay, let me bring back the assignment right here. Okay. All right, so we've done this, and now what you'll do, I completed the workflow, and you will share your URL. Now, your URL in this case means, I do have that open here. Okay? So you can, now I'll show you next week how to actually share your commits with me, but for now you can just grab this URL that indicates your week 1. You can copy that. So as your assignment part, what you'll be doing here is in your reply, okay, you'll be sharing your link, and when you hit enter, notice what happens. It automatically creates a link here, and if you ever wanted to look at that content, you could come down here and see what it actually wrote for you. This is what Canvas wrote. But in this point now, all you have to do is do a little writing. So what you want to do now is your name and why you're taking this course. Did you run into any issues with the local dev environment in the previous assignment? And if not, if you did, talk to us about how you worked through that. And if not, share anything related to this topic, okay, of setting up your dev environment, maybe your Git commands, your workflow, anything about that. And then the last thing I want you to include, and by the way, I should say, please introduce yourselves, right? And having your photo on Canvas is really nice, so I ask that you do that. I'm not going to hard require it, but if you want, I appreciate it, and I think other students would appreciate that as well. Okay, so then, have you used ChatGPT, right? If not, I definitely recommend, and I've probably already said this, setting up a free account, because there are definitely times that when taking this course, using it should help you. It should be like you're a tutor, and I want to help you work through how to write prompts. Now, this was a very simple prompt. The prompt is basically just a question. This is the output of the chat. And by the way, there are others now. Bard, Google has one. I mean, there are others that are becoming very popular. But this one, of course, is the most popular. And then, have you used it, right? And if not, have you heard about it? I should say about it. And if so, give us your thoughts, right? If you haven't, right, I recommend setting up an account. All right, so then what you want to do is complete. So that's your post. I'm going to say it, I don't want to do writing length, but I would say I want you to have a substantive reply here, right? And then substantive post, meaning, don't just do one-liners. Do a little more about that here. And then to get full points for this, you want to do replies to your 2 classmates. This is worth 100 points, 85 for your post and a working link, and 15 for your replies. So this is where you would write, okay? And then when you're ready, you'd go ahead and post that, and then go in and post your replies to your fellow students. Okay, I hope you learned something in this assignment. It's definitely introduced to some concepts we'll be using throughout the course, and hopefully in a way that's digestible. All right, so I will talk to you soon.